welcome everybody. Thank you for being here. My name is Nick Mehta, managing partner of Studio Legale Meta. I am based in the US, Pennsylvania, and I've been practicing law for almost 30 years. I'm also a dual citizen, American and Italian, and a real estate enthusiast. I purchased my first unit at 21 and continued since then. I have purchased, renovated, remodeled, flipped mortgages, rented, sold, you name it. And then when I moved here to the US about 15 years ago, I kept doing that just because I love real estate. And I have to say that as soon as I got here to the US, I realized how different the two systems are and how many crucial differences might be important to know upfront to facilitate, to make a transaction more cost effective, more tax effective, more stress free, and do your investment with more confidence. I was lucky, very lucky, to have next to me my brother-in-law, Justin Sternaire, who was also my realtor and my broker, mortgage broker. He was also a real estate investor himself. He is actually, indeed. So he helped me navigate the US real estate market and overcome that confusion and feeling of discomfort of the unknown. And if you ever felt that type of feeling, approaching or thinking about approaching a property purchase overseas, well, just know that you are not alone because this is something that happens to everyone who plans to buy overseas or who is buying overseas. So during this workshop, one of our main goals is to help you resolve that issue of the unknown and that feeling that can get in the middle sometimes. So in this workshop in particular, we will go through many aspects of an Italian property purchase. We obviously cannot really go through everything. However, our focus is what a non-Italian buyer is going to have on his or her radar when approaching an Italian property purchase. And also, we're going to give you some actionable tips for you to take control in certain situations and to make a more informed decisions, really. So I always stress this something to my clients that although we want to assume that everyone acts in good faith in a property purchase transaction, all the players who might be involved, there are unfortunately situations or circumstances that create misunderstandings that you may call it language barrier, you can call it cultural difference, you can call it differences, you can call it geographical distance. So, unfortunately, issues arise from these challenges and also aggravated by the fact that many times a non-Italian buyer will not know where they need help, at what stage during a transaction, and who should be a person, the best person to provide that support, that help. And on the other end, the other players might not know that a non-Italian buyer might need that extra information, that extra um, help in a specific situation. So that combination of circumstances creates misunderstandings and sometimes um, unpleasant results. So one of the goals of this workshop, as I said, is to give you some tips about situations that, in our opinion, you should have on your radar, and also some tips to address them. For example, let's look at the first slide here. So you see here, these are the players who typically are involved in a real estate transaction. However, in Italy, not all players are involved in a transaction in an Italian property purchase. For example, the owner is only involved if it is a sale by owner. So you usually will deal with a owner only if there's no real estate agent. Most often there is a real estate agent who is involved, and real estate agents unfortunately are dual. So the listing agent will also represent you as the buyer. So the listing agent will act actually as a facilitator for the deal, will work for the deal to make the deal happen. The notary, who is a law professional in Italy, who has gone through law school, and so is a very, very expert legal law professional, will make sure that the transaction is legally completed. How does he do that or she do that? By taking from the parties statements in the form of affidavits under oath, where the parties make statements, represent what their position is with respect to the transaction. So the notary also is a neutral, acts as a neutral party in the transaction, doesn't represent the buyer or the seller. Then you might have a surveyor. Surveyor is a technician like an architect or an engineer who can check property building compliance, which is something extremely important to check in Italy. More than 50% of Italian real estate has building compliance issues that make property not suitable for sale. You can have also a property finder. It is not common in Italy to hire a property finder. However, it is becoming more common over time. Just make sure that if you hire a property finder, you make very clear, specific arrangements to about the commission, because under default Italian civil law, and Raffaella will talk more about this later with you, when you deal with a real estate agent or when a real estate agent is involved in a transaction, you as the buyer owe that real estate agent a commission, usually 3% plus VAT, so it's about 3.66%, even if you have very little interactions with that real estate agent. So if you have a property finder assisting you with the property that is listed by a real estate agent, if you don't have clear arrangements about the commission with the property finder and the real estate agent, you might be asked to pay a fee to both of them. Then you might have a home inspector. It is very common in many jurisdictions, not in Italy. However, you can ask a surveyor, for example, to inspect the property and the features that might concern you, the roof, the heating system, AC, whatever it is that you might be more preoccupied with. An appraiser in Italy is not very common, really, unless there is a mortgage involved. And yes, mortgages are possible for non-Italian investors. It is possible to get a mortgage, although there are specific terms and conditions to apply. I will talk about that later. In addition to a mortgage broker, mortgage institution, there might be a mortgage an insurance broker if you want your homeowner's insurance established on your property. Italians don't usually do that. If you want your homeowner's insurance, I mean, when I started investing in the US, I wouldn't do any deal without having my insurance lined up. You can have that done easily too. You just need to work on it at least a couple of weeks prior to closing to have it done. And then there is the lawyer. The main difference between the lawyer and a real estate agent, a notary, for example, is that the lawyer will work exclusively in your interest, but not just any lawyer, an experienced property lawyer will. And the main role of the lawyer is to work on documents that are buyer focused. So if you go to sign a purchase offer, or if you go to closing, you will be presented usually by the real estate agent, the notary, with a template that is the same for every single transaction. Yes, they changed the clauses to adapt it to the specific case. However, the transaction, the template will be the same. A lawyer will use a buyer-focused template or buyer-focused clauses. And we will share with you later in the second part of this workshop some of these clauses and how to use them to your advantage, and also how to make sure that they are not perceived as aggressive or excessive. They need to be reasonable, obviously, to give you protection without upsetting the other party. So going quickly to the next slide, I think I have here, yes, the financial. We talked about the financials briefly earlier. So what are the challenges of buying as a non-Italian person? And I'm not talking about citizenship here. I'm talking about living overseas, living in a country that is not Italy, not having an Italian bank account, having your money in a different currency than the euro. I'm talking about having basically lacking the basic financial tools that are very common to have in Italy for an Italian living in Italy who wants to buy a property. So, in order to overcome some of the challenges of buying overseas in terms of financials, call it currency change, call it international wiring policy, special anti-money laundering requirements you might need to fulfill. You there are options. There are options, obviously, and first of all, unfortunately, opening an Italian bank account, although many think that that would do it, that would resolve the issue of financials, is not really a practical way to go. Because first of all, in order to open an Italian bank account, you need to be physically in Italy, usually in most cases for anti-money laundering formalities. Secondly, Italian money bank accounts are very difficult and to manage or receive remotely, subject to very high expenses, and also you will still have to transfer money from your home country to Italy. So the alternative is not having an Italian bank account. And the good news is you can buy a property without having an Italian bank account. You can establish in your home country with your bank. You can see if they offer a currency exchange and international wire transfer. Many banks now I saw that are offering them. I saw that Wells Fargo, for example, offers it. And also, you can perhaps even an easier option. You can open a foreign exchange currency account with some of the most common players like OFX, Moneycorp, Wise. I'm sure that some of you already have one. You can manage it from your phone where you are at your home in the US or in Italy or anywhere else in the world. You can just open one of these brokerage accounts and move money way more easily when you want. Plus, the other option in Italy for a place to lend your money in is utilize an Italian-based escrow account. And my recommendation is ask a realtor, ask a notary, or ask a lawyer. These are typically the people who offer the service. Real estate agents more rarely. Notaries sometimes a little bit with some rigid terms. Lawyers usually are more flexible because they tailor the escrow account to your needs. And also contemplate financing, leverage Italian mortgage opportunities to finance your deal. That said, that was it for my first part of the presentation. I'll let Raffaella talk to you about how to actually go and actually look for a property in Italy.
So, if you are looking for a property in Italy, the first question you are probably asking for is how to look for a property in Italy. The best way to start your search is to use some websites like Immobiliare, Idealista, and Gateway. However, these are portals which show you what is available based on some parameters you set in the website, such as the location of the property, your budget, number of rooms, and some other features like number of bathrooms or parking. If you've never taken a look to these Italian websites, you probably will be disappointed by the level of information they provide about Italian properties, especially if you are used to US systems or to multiple listing services or websites like Zillow and Trulia. You will definitely find a lower level of information. For instance, you based it on your experience in your country, you can find this kind of information and many others. In Italy, you can find less information. For instance, you will not find annual taxes, price history, year bill, and HOA information. So this means that from the beginning of your search, you will be dealing with a gap between the system and the level of information you are used to in your country and the level of information you can find in Italian websites. This is why the purpose of this workshop is to provide you with some tools to bridge the gap between your system, the system you are used to, and the Italian system, so that you can plan your investments and your transaction can be more transparent and clear. Which leads me to the next topics. Civil law default rules. What civil law default rules are and how to deviate from them to your advantage when you make a purchase software. There are two different kinds of civil law default rules. There are some rules applicable in case the parties of a transaction have not agreed to a specific different regulation. In this case, if you are aware about the default rules, you can decide whether you want to apply them or to agree to a specific different regulation to be included in the purchase software. Then there are civil law default rules that are applicable regardless of any different agreement between the parties. In this case, for this kind of rules, any different agreement between the parties are void since they are not allowed by the law. This is why it is in the best interest of the parties to be aware about the legal frame within which they can regulate their transaction. We are showing you some default rules you can use for your advantage when you make a purchase software. The first one is related to notary's escrow account, as mentioned by Nick. As per the Italian law, the buyer can decide to pay, to settle the purchase price through notary's escrow account. It is only on buyer's choice, and the seller cannot make any objection. So this means that it is not strictly required any agreement between the buyer and the seller for the notary escrow account use. However, we recommend to include into the purchase offer the right that the buyer keeps the right to decide before purchase closing if he would like to use notary's escrow account. Another example is related to purchase offer, and about this, Nick will provide you with more information during the case study. Another one example is related to the habitability certificate. The habitability certificate is a paper certificate which certifies that the property meets all the legal requirements to be used for habitation. As per the law, it is not required for the seller to provide the buyer with this document, with this certificate. This is why most of the templates do not mention habitability certificate at all. However, also in this case, we usually recommend to include your agreement with the other party about the habitability certificate for transparency. Should the purchase software not include any provision about the habitability certificate, in any case, before purchase closing, the buyer might claim that the property at least meets the legal requirement to obtain the habitability certificate. So these are just some of the most frequent situation when the both civil rules apply in an Italian property purchase. And in the next part, Nick will present more of them and how to address them.
Thank you, Rafaela. Thank you so much. Yeah, civil law is crazy because of the all the default rules that apply, regardless what you might put in a contract. So you want to be aware of what those default rules are, how to make sure they don't carry any surprise for your transactions.